boys and girls, and welcome to the concession stand here on the KB Radio Network. And this is the review of Loki Season 2, Episode 5, entitled Science Fiction. And man, this was the penultimate episode, the second to last episode of this season. And what an episode. This is hands down the best episode of the series. I'm not going season. I'm talking of the past two seasons. This was the best episode of any of the Marvel shows. If you want to be completely honest, I enjoyed it. If you can't tell, I enjoyed this episode. We're coming off the heels of episode 4 where, I mean, things got real. It got real at the end of that episode. Victor Timely got obliterated. The temporal loom imploded, and everybody seemed to have died at the end. And we pop into episode 5. And all week I was scratching my head leading up into this episode, like, okay, where are we going from here? Is it, how can they top where they left us in the last episode, because it was such a final thing. It felt like a season finale, if not a series finale of a show. And so we're picking right back up 7 days later. How can we top that? Well, they found the way. With the TVA destroyed, Loki, season 2, episode 5, looked at its existence without the TVA. Loki, he managed to be the only one to survive the meltdown of the temporal loom, and basically must get the gang back together and get again in order to try and save the TVA and restore life as we know it. This episode, Science Fiction, was directed by Justin Benson and Aaron Moorhead, and it was written by Eric Martin. And I just want to say excellent job by those individuals. This was a well-directed, I mean, oh my God, this was such a well-directed episode and well-written as well. There was a lot to take away from this week's episode. We finally get to see Mobius with his jet skis. It's something that has been planted from episode 1 of season 1. We finally get to see that. And we learned about the lives of the other TVA agents prior to them becoming a TVA agent. We have who was it? B15, I think her name is. She was a doctor. Casey was a criminal who escaped from Alcatraz. OB, he was a science fiction author and a scientist, and Sylvie, she was just back at McDonald's where she's happy, serving Happy Meals. So it was a weird episode in that sense, but this go around we get a Loki centric episode, which shouldn't come off as strange because this is Loki. But I made comments in previous episodes where it wasn't much Loki. Not that that was a bad thing. It just wasn't much Loki in some of those episodes. This was Loki. This was Tom Hiddleston doing God's work here. He acted his behind off. This was the best Loki I've seen on Disney Plus. We've seen great performances from his in the movies, but this was his best performance, I feel, as Loki on this TV show. And man, he's trying to discover a way to control his time slipping, because he reverted back to time slipping after the temporal loom exploded. And so we do a little, well, not a little, but a lot of jumping around across the timelines, across the universes, and the episode actually hinges on the most major growth we've seen from the Loki character since we met him in Thor. This was a very heavy episode. I mean, heavy as far as the emotion, the drama, but it was also a lot of comedy. There was also a lot of tension. I mean, everything fit in this episode and it flowed perfectly. Um, it may seem silly to me to say um that I'm glad that the show titled Loki was actually about Loki this go around. But in the past, and it is not just Loki. You go through all the Disney Plus shows involving the MCU, even the movies as of late. They're more of launching points for other projects, other shows, or other movies. It's not just character based, and this show manages to do that, to be connected to the overall MCU yet stand alone. And man, it is so fun to watch. It's really, we're going back to like phase 1, phase 2 MCU. That's the feeling I get watching this show. Uh so it's been nice to watch this show so so far. So let's go through this episode entitled Science Fiction. The episode kicks off with Loki on his own in the TVA. Everybody is gone, and the TVA has kicked into this safe mode. It's like I don't know. It's like it sent everybody back to their individual timelines, and the only one left standing was indeed Loki. So he's searching for everybody. He begins to time slip again. This time isn't just time slipping throughout the TVA. As the TVA turns into this little spaghetti stuff, he time slips away, and the next appearance is in 1962 on a branch timeline in Alcatraz, the prison in San Francisco. Here we find Casey, except this is not the Casey that we know. It's actually Frank, a career criminal who's trying to escape Alcatraz with his fellow prisoners. Uh, Throughout the episode, Loki is pulled through time and space, but when, or should I say, where he ends up is not so random. Instead, he appears to be at the locations of each of his friends. Friends being B-15, who is now a doctor named Dr. Wallace, or Willis, in I think 2012 New York, if I'm not mistaken. And we see OB. He's actually an author by the name of A.D. Doug in 1994. And we find Morbius. He's now named Doug, and he's a jet ski salesman, nonetheless, in Cleveland. And so, out of all of them, OB seems to be the least surprised when he sees Loki appear before him. And so Loki sits him down and tells him about the TVA and everything that has happened with the temporal loom and all this here. And so maybe it's because he's a science fiction author, or maybe it's because he teaches physics, theological physics, however he said it in the show. But he bought it. It was like, okay, that's cool. I believe you. Regardless, OB deduces that the time slipping may be attached to Loki and what he wants. So OB decides that they need to assemble everybody in the room together to get the group's temporal aura so he can transport back to the spot in time and space where he needs to be. So he gives OB, he being Loki, gives OB the temporal, not the temporal, but the TVA guidebook so he can build a temp pad. But before Loki can say anything else, he time slips back to Cleveland, where we find Doug, aka Morbius. So Loki approaches Morbius, and who by the way has no idea who he is. None of them know who he is. But it's very weird here. And I say weird, like in the sense that it's kind of hurtful. It's heartbreaking in a way because they're friends. You go as far to say they're best friends, and Morbius doesn't recognize Loki. And so It's not until OB appears almost, I don't know, 5 minutes after Loki had popped back up. And Loki has a good line. He's like, man, how you built that so fast? He's like, man, it's been 18, 19 months. You know, I lost my apartment. My wife left me, but he, uh, that's the way time works. It's not linear. And so, once he appears through the door, now Morbius, he starts to believe him. But in this universe, he's a single dad of two sons, and he's not comfortable leaving his sons behind. Even though Loki is pretty much giving a convincing argument that he needs to come with him, but understandably, he doesn't want to leave his sons behind. And uh, Loki is like, well, look, I can bring you back to this time. It's like it'll be like you never left, or whatever the case may be. And so after some persuading, Morbius agrees to go with him, and Loki and OB assemble the rest of the team before going to collect Sylvie. He saved the best for last, so he returns back to the McDonald's in 1982, and Loki approaches Sylvie and is ready to give his speech that he was giving to everybody else. Like, look, I know this is going to sound strange, but you don't know who I am. And she's like, I know who you are. You're Loki. She knows. It, Sylvie remembers him and has all of the memories intact. Rather than going back with him and assembling the group together, she takes him to a bar so they can have a drink, and they continue the argument that they've been having throughout these seasons on Loki regarding free will or control. And so Loki is determined to save the TVA and is baffled that Sylvie is being selfish for wanting her own life. But to this, Sylvie argues. Uh, well, actually, she agrees that she is selfish, but she, she wants a life. She wants to live. But she kind of turns the table and asks Loki, what does he want? And after giving these little prepared answers or whatever, she continues to ask because she know what it is, and he finally breaks down and says, I want my friends back. And so with him saying that, Sylvie is able to reverse it and say, well, you're the one being selfish. You're taking these people away from their lives, and it was like a gut punch because she was right. you know well, the sad part about Loki and Sylvie's argument, they're both right. Even though they have two completely different viewpoints, they're both right in a way, and that's what makes this so compelling. you know but after all this, Sylvie leaves Loki in the bar and she goes to this record store where she, I guess this is her fortress of solitude. This is her place of peace where she goes and listen to music and whatnot and kind of zone out. Meanwhile, Loki returns back to where the group is assembled at, and uh, he has a change of heart. He's telling, everybody in the group that he was wrong. You can return back to your timeline and whatnot. But Morbius is like, wait, you told me that the world was in danger, the universe was in danger, that my children were in danger. So that's just that. And Loki doesn't have an answer. He doesn't know what to say. He just like, look, y'all just go back. Just go back. And so at the same time, Sylvie, who's at this record store, and oh man, this was like, what is going on? All of a sudden, everything around the record store starts spaghettifying, and that timeline is being destroyed, and everything around her is crumbling and spaghetti fying and all this here. I don't know if spaghetti fying is a word, but I just like the way it goes. But that's what it looks like. Everything turns into this little spaghetti strings and just vanish. And so she uses the temp pad that she got from He Who Remains in season 1, and goes and meets up with the group, with Loki and the group. And she tells him, like, no, I was wrong. You was right. You know, that nobody is safe. All these timelines are collapsing. And so, with everybody back together, with the addition of Sylvie, the group can finally collect everybody's temporal aura and go back to that moment in time that they need to be at before the temporal loom explodes. But it's too late. Slowly, each of the characters start to spaghettify in front of Loki, and the whole world disappears into these strings with temporal spaghetti. And it's at this moment that he time slips and jumps right back to the moment before everybody starts to spaghettify. And he now realizes that he can get a handle on the time slipping. He found a way to control it. So Loki knows what he needs to do to rewrite the story. So he's able to time slip right before Victor Timely goes through that blast door. At least that's the moment we think, because he goes back and we're in the temporal loom little, that little blast area room or whatever it was called. I don't even remember what it's called, but soon he just time slips right behind OB in the credits roll, and you're like, oh my god. It was classic. It was beautiful, beautifully done. I'm telling you, this was an amazing job by the writers and the directors of this episode. I enjoyed this. Not It wasn't action filled. It wasn't special effects galore, even though it was. I mean, the spaghetti firing was special effects, I suppose. But you get where I'm coming from. It wasn't this cosmic battles and all this other stuff. It was real drama, real emotion, beautiful acting by Tom Hiddleston. Man, it reminds you why you fell in love with this character, going all the way back to Thor. You know, it reminded you of that. And God, he did an awesome job in this episode. Everybody, really, everybody who was a part of that group, Morbius, B12, B15 or whatever, Casey and OB, even Sylvie, but they were all different from their characters that we know and love throughout the TVA. It was just a joy to watch this. Everybody did an amazing job on this episode, which brings me to the fear that I'm gonna have for the next 7 days because I'm praying every day going forward that they can land this plane. I am so scared. I am frightened beyond frightened sake that they are able to land this properly and not uh, poo the bed on the very last episode of this season. This has been a joy to watch. I guess partly because I think I stated this either last week or the week before last that the MCU has been struggling mighty with their movies and TV shows, and they're not really hitting, as well as we would have liked. But we're finally at a show where it is knocking it out of the park. We are 5 episodes in, and all 5 have been outstanding. So, man, please don't mess this up. I'm, I'm praying they do not mess this up, but I can tell you these first 5, I'm encouraged. I think we're in for a treat next week for the season finale. Whether it's the series finale or not, we'll have to wait and see. But man, this has been a joy to watch. I would like to know, how are you enjoying Loki so far, and are you looking forward to the season finale next week? And what do you think is going to happen next week as we come to the end of this story? Email the show, kbradiopodcast@gmail.com. You can also look me up on all social media platforms. Just look up the KB Radio Network. Also, subscribe to the KB Radio Network channel on YouTube and like this video. Also, don't forget about the 5 stars, the reviews, and sharing this show if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you are currently listening to the Concession Stand here on the KB Radio Network. Once again, everybody, not grading this episode, just like I didn't grade the previous 4 episodes, but next week we will give a final grade for the entire season of Loki season 2. Will it be an A? Will it be an F? We shall see. Going off of so far, it looks like an A. But if next week is bad, I'll probably be so mad I'll give it an F as a whole. But I don't think so. I feel confident. I feel good about this. I feel real good. But we shall wait and see. Can't wait to speak to you next week as we review that season finale of Loki. Everybody, I want you all to know that I love you. Continue to love everyone. Until we speak again, you all be blessed.